but they're also independently wealthy. If you have a couple $1,000,000 or a couple $100 million to throw in, I'm not rich and wealthy, I'm a regular guy. But those who don't, they are all forced down this road. Because of the nature of the way the system works.
But doesn't that make an argument for clean elections then? If only the wealthy can run without it, then maybe we need it.
Well, the reason why the system, it says if you're not independently wealthy, then it's impossible to raise sufficient funds in the traditional sense in order to be competitive. The system is so punitive to the traditional candidate that isn't wealthy. There's no punishment for those who are independently wealthy. They're kind of a loophole within the system. But for the normal traditional candidate, it is. I still oppose it. I'm filing supplemental filings, hoping they'll overturn it, even though that might benefit or actually be detrimental to my current campaign. The First Amendment is more important to me than my own personal campaign. We're going to continue to fight it. As long as it's the law of the land, though, we have to play within the rules that are there while they're still there.
But how do you justify saying, oh, we need to take health care away from people who are at the federal poverty level and roll it back to 1/3 the federal poverty level and then take $2 million for a primary campaign for your governor's political campaign?
Well, I'd love to take all the clean elections money and use it to education or healthcare or some of the other areas. Unfortunately, we can't. Until we can get the law struck down, that money is segregated and not allowed to be moved anywhere else. I've actually talked to Senator Payton about we should put it on the ballot, taking the money from the clean election system and pouring it back into education. I think that would be a much better use of these funds. And as long as this is in place, it's kind of like if you think of football. If you've got a team that opposes the instant replay rule and they try to get rid of it, but they're in the Super Bowl and they got a bad call, they're not going to not use the system. As long as it's there, you've got to use and play by the rules that are there, even while you try to work within the system to change them.
What puts you at such a disadvantage raising funds traditionally?
Well, because of the matching provisions that they have, not only for matching individuals to raise money, but they also, where other people don't want to donate, they say, well, why should I give you money here when you've got all this over there? Just go do that instead. And so other people are afraid, well, why would we want to give you funds when that's only going to give your opponents who we don't support more money? And so they really it put a chill, and it also chills you during the most important phase, which is the beginning of the revenue generation phase, or where you're fundraising. And so we had to make this decision a long time ago that if you're going to be looking at a race like this, it's just really not viable.
I'm wondering what you think the clean election system has done in terms of the quality of the candidates who end up running for office?
Well, I think that it's really eliminated a lot of the vetting process that normally had gone on. When you were running for office and you have to go out and talk to people, no one special interest can fund a candidate completely under a more traditional system. But now with the clean election system, one special interest can completely qualify a candidate and be 100% responsible for their campaign funding and therefore their campaign. And in essence, they become a wholly owned subsidiary. And so rather than having candidates who have to speak to and learn about a broad spectrum of issues, they become basically a subsidiary of one. And this happens, what's happened, I think, in the legislative process is it's polarized it. You've seen the legislature move to the extremes on both sides, not just Republican or Democrat. I mean, both sides have moved out as a result of this kind of strange perversion of the system.
What is your strategy now running for governor? We've got about a handful of candidates. We have Mr. John Munger, the attorney from down here in Tucson. Mm-hmm. We have the gentleman up in Prescott, I believe, who's spent about $2 million out of his own money. We have you. We have Vernon Parker from Paradise Valley. So we've got about 5 candidates. Mm-hmm. So what's your strategy to separate you from the pack?
Well, we're just going to continue to do what I've been doing for the last 3 years and telling the truth, tell you the way it is, the way we see it. If I think the voters are looking for candidates, and this is what people have been coming to me for 8 months, saying you need to look at this race, you need to get into it, because we need people who can see the problems before they happen. I mean, if we go back 3 years ago, I was standing all by myself warning and trying to prevent, all the terrible things that are going to come, tax increases or cuts, dramatic cuts, all of these things could have been avoided had you act quicker, sooner, when it was a much smaller problem. And I think the voters are looking for a candidate who's willing to stand up to those in power even when it's not popular and tell the truth. And nobody else was willing to do that 3 years ago.
Got 1 minute left.
What did you think of the governor's State of the State message?
It was a good speech. I'd like to hear the fact that she was willing to tackle Prop 204. That's something that has to be dealt with one way or another. You can't have an uncontrolled cost like that. I was hoping to hear a little bit more about working together and kind of rallying. This was her speech to the legislature, and we need 16 senators and 31 House members to agree with her on something in order for us to balance the budget. So I was hoping a little bit more that would have rallied them together and bonded them together. It seemed like more of a campaign speech, but it was her speech to give.
Do you have a yes or no question for the treasurer?
Under no circumstances would you accept a tax increase for the people of Arizona?
I support giving them the option on 204 because they were lied to originally, and let them decide how they want to fix this. But other than that, I think we really need to limit any other options.
Treasurer Dean Martin, thanks for being with us, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.